Today I'd like to talk about my story, which begins in Rhodesia in 1957 when I was born. My parents, my dad was a farmer. He grew tobacco and maize and a few other crops, cattle, and my mum lived next door to the farm my dad bought, and so they met, they got married, and they had 4 children. I'm the second born, and our life in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, was, brought up on a farm. We had, we could run anywhere we wanted, we could explore. And basically it was, I was only 6 by the time I left Africa, so I don't remember a whole lot. I have snippets of memory from Africa, going fishing, animals, swimming, going to the beach, in Mozambique. So there's little snippets. I also remember being very ill. I had asthma as a child, and at least a couple of times I was rushed to hospital, which was in Harare, or used to be Salisbury then, in the late 50s. So my childhood was what you'd call sickly, unhappy in some ways, because there was many things I couldn't do. There were days I had to stay in bed. I couldn't go and play with my brothers or sister. So my life in Africa was punctuated by sickness and just childhood in general. My parents, they both smoked, drank alcohol, just your average family. So in 1962, my dad, through some miracle, saw the writing on the wall that there would be an uprising, that Africa was in a transition from a white colonial rule to independent black rule. And there were at the time there was a group called the Mau Mau who really wanted to kick out the colonial rule in Rhodesia, and eventually that happened. They changed the name to Zimbabwe, and Mugabe is still the dictator in that country. So in 1962 my dad saw the writing on the wall, and he decided to pack up, sell out and move to Denmark. And the reason to go to Denmark was his mother lived in Denmark and he had spent time in Denmark. So we packed up and flew to Denmark, and I spent all my primary school years in Denmark. From I was 6 years old when I landed there, and I was 13 when I left Denmark. And I remember Denmark as a beautiful country. I loved the snow, I loved the autumn, I loved the spring, I loved all the seasons. And basically my 2 brothers and I, we had total freedom. In summer when we weren't going to school, we'd get up before dawn. We all had air rifles. We'd go out hunting, shooting rabbits, birds, whatever. And this was really a part of how my dad brought us up, because he used to hunt game in Africa, and he kept talking about all his game hunting experiences. So we took that on and we'd go out hunting. It was just what we did. We'd go out for hours, come home and have breakfast and just play, go for walks, ride our bikes. In winter we go skiing, and we just spent most of the day outside. Didn't matter whether it was winter or summer. And I really loved Denmark. It was where I started to really enjoy my life. I still had allergies, I still had asthma, and that sort of bugged me because every week I'd have to go and get injections, cortisone. I don't know what they injected me with, but every week I had an injection for allergies. So that went on pretty well till I was 13, and then my dad again decided that Denmark was too highly taxed, and his half-brother had come to Australia. He loved it. He's big open spaces, you know, bring your family out. So my dad said, yeah, let's do that. And so we packed up again. We came to Sydney on a boat. We spent 5 weeks on a boat. We caught a train from Denmark to south of France in Marseille, caught a boat. We sailed across the Atlantic to Panama. We stopped at all the French islands on the way. It was beautiful. I loved it. We went through Panama Canal and then through the Pacific Ocean, and we stopped all the French islands on the Pacific Ocean, and that was just incredible. I fell in love with diving, with the reef, tropical islands. Yeah, it was probably the most amazing journey I've had in those 13 years of life. And then we landed in Sydney. We were put up in old army barracks, and the second day we were in Sydney, in this strange country, strange town, my parents decided to put us into school. And to this day, I don't know what they were thinking, how you could just turn up in a strange country and go straight to school. It was just nuts. But anyway, they put us, my three brothers, or my two brothers and I, we went to a boys' school, and we did the best we could. You know, even though I understood English, because in Africa we spoke English, but I'd basically let that go and now only spoke Danish, and then I had to, you know, revert back to English again. So I did that. And Australian schools, I just didn't get it. I couldn't quite understand their schooling method. In Denmark, we had far more advanced schooling. It would be more like the Steiner school or the Montessori type schooling, where Australia was just like out of the 19th century, a boys only school. It was just crazy. So needless to say, my schooling just took a nosedive. I didn't understand the Australian slang, their you know, just their way of talking. So within the next 2 or 3 years, I basically just fell behind. I was dyslexic, couldn't understand, and I didn't ask anyone. I'm an empath. I keep to myself. I'm shy. I'm reserved. So the very fact of standing up in the front of all my you know, fellow students and asking a question was never going to happen in a million years. So I just basically, by the time I was in grade 8, at the end of grade 8, I passed. At the end of grade 9, I failed, but through whatever system Australian had for schooling, they just pushed you up to the next grade. So I went to grade 9, and in grade 9 I didn't pass, and then they pushed me into grade 10. Grade 10 I didn't pass. So I was offered an apprenticeship as a sheet metal worker, and the only things I did pass at school was metalwork and woodwork and tech drawing. That was it. So I took the sheet metal apprenticeship and said, yeah, I'll do that. And I found out within the first week that this was probably the worst decision I've ever made. I was stuck in a factory. I could see beautiful blue skies, beautiful weather. You know, why can't I be outside? Why can't I, you know, get into nature? I love nature. But anyway, So for 3 years I was a sheet metal worker and I hated it. I just hated every minute of it. And by the end of 3 years I started taking drugs. I bought myself a motorbike. And like they say, sex, drugs and rock and roll, that was the end of my working apprenticeship. I ended up having a bike accident. I smashed my leg up and I spent a month in hospital, and I just kept questioning, why am I here? What am I doing on this planet? What's the purpose of life? Just getting smashed in drugs and sex and rock and roll? What's the point of that? And eventually, by the time I got out of hospital, I started reading, and that was the first time in my life I had stopped long enough to start asking those questions. So I started reading books on alternative health, on alternative religions. I was brought up Catholic, and I could never understand Catholicism. I could never understand how anyone could dress up in a black robe and speak Latin. What was that all about? So I went on this alternative and I started questioning everything I did. I questioned society, I questioned school, I questioned my parents, I questioned everything. Marijuana helped me to see another reality. And I started asking questions, what are we doing? Why would I work, 20, 30 years in a job I hate? Why would anyone do that? So by the time I had done 3 years of a sheet metal apprenticeship, I said, that's it, I'm out of here. And I went on unemployment, and thank God for unemployment, because